admission from a woman who accused Duke University lacrosse players of raping her nearly 20 years ago. The story was a national firestorm. She now says she lied about the encounter. Crystal Mangum first made the claims back in 2006, saying 3 members of the school's lacrosse team raped her after she had been hired to dance at a house party the team was throwing. Police charged David Evans, Colin Finnerty, and Reed Seligman after Mangum's accusations. But after much back and forth and the city's DA stepping down from the case, North Carolina's Attorney General later dismissed the charge.
Let me also throw in, kind of like with Bernard Goetz, once they turned on him, Penny and so many others, Chevon, so many others, the anti-white population, from conservatives all the way to real kill all the white people now anti-whites, were calling for them to go to jail. They were guilty. They were guilty as far as America was concerned. That's exactly how I remember it. And just like so many others, they were, and who was on trial? The whole white race. It's just that look at these little guys. Look, I mean, like, look at them. They're babies. They're babies, and they would have been in prison with hardcore, like south of the border and inner city in America, monsters. That's what they would have had to live with. So she lies about the first story, but we're supposed to believe her second story. Yeah, good question.
Are just citing a lack of evidence, but now going on the record on a podcast nearly 20
citing a lack of evidence. In other words, there was no evidence. As I remember, there was no evidence.
Years later, Crystal Mangum says she was lying the whole time.
I testified falsely against them by saying that they raped me when they didn't, and that was wrong. And
okay, so the way this happened, she did not have some sort of epiphany or God spoke to her and told her to come out and say that she had lied about the whole thing. No, you see, she's in prison for murder. Good person. She's in prison for murder for stabbing her boyfriend to death. Stabbing him to death. And this was the Queen of America. Horribly raped and abused and beaten and bodily fluids fired all over her. It was a really nasty story that she came up with. I mean, it was disgusting. It was like smut pornography, the story she came up with, probably because she had made that or lived that willingly with others. So she had this absolute smut ass story about what they had done to her. Pure as the driven snow. Crystal Meth Mangum. I'm sorry about the last name. It's been 18 years.
I betrayed the trust of a lot of other people who believed in me.
Anybody else remember this? So let's hear what she's saying here. And then we have it's summarized. But what happened? So she didn't have this. She didn't say, God, I really got to come forward because I ruined their lives. Imagine the fear that went through their lives when this was happening. Imagine the fear that will never go away, experienced by their mothers, their fathers, who know what's in prison, and they can look over at their little doughy son and think that he's going to end up in there with the animals in prison. Some of which, of course, are wonderful people. I just have to say that because I don't know for sure if prisoners are a protected class, but some of them might be wonderful people. But there are animals in prison as well. Really monstrous people by that. So the horror, and siblings as well. So how this happens is a podcaster decided that she had read about the story, she'd come across it, and she looked up crystal meth here and said, oh, she's in prison. I wonder if I could get an interview, try to gin up some views for my podcast. Man, talk about stepping on a success, because Crystal says, sure, I'll do an interview with you. And then writes back and says, and yeah, and of course, this woman, Kate, I think her name is, Chat with Kate or something it was called, wants to talk about the incident and the trial and everything that happened and whatever else that Crystal Meth here would like to talk about. And Crystal Meth writes back and says, oh yeah, and while we're talking about that, I'll tell you that I made it up. So that's how this came about. This was no like big change of heart. I've got to do this for these guys. I've got to clear their names. But I want you to listen closely to the things she say, that supposed apology, because I never find it. She's worried about herself. Not for charges for lying, the afterlife. And she probably has even less of a concern for the afterlife as she does of an opportunity to be in the spotlight again. She's back on that pole. I mean, they should have gave this bitch a poll during this podcast. Sloth's asking a pertinent question. Did she get revenue share? That's actually a really great question. Because, in prison, you can get money and you can buy more. You have less money, you buy less. You have more money, you buy more. Depending upon where you are and a number of other factors. That's a great question. Not to mention, is she going to get out of prison for this murder at some point? And she's going to need money? Really great question. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I betrayed the trust of a lot of other people who believed in me. And made up a story that wasn't true because I wanted validation from people and not from God.
See, this is the Bravo Sierra. Some of the truckfuls of it coming right from the circus of the Bravo Sierra. Oh, I did it because I wanted validation from people rather than God to say that I'm okay. So in other words, you're the victim. You're still the victim. You're still just this injured, beautiful puppy that's the victim.
And that was wrong when God already loved me for who I was, regardless.
And there's this notion too, I just got to squash it. God does not love you if you are a vulgar, disgusting, cheap-ass whore. This pansy-ass anti-white version of Christianity is not part of the biosphere of the West. If you are degenerate POS, God hates you. He doesn't love you. Let's get this right. Nobody would have ever converted. Nobody would have ever worshiped. Nobody would have ever come to church if they actually believe. And that's why, another reason why the churches are dying and have become something completely different from the biospirit of the West. Our projection is this notion that God's going to love you no matter what you do. You don't have to accept Jesus. You don't have to obey the commandments. You don't have to obey. You could just do whatever you want. God loves you, and you're just forgiven at all points and all times. False. You're going to hell.
I didn't need to seek validation from him because I already had validation from him. I just didn't know it. And I hurt my brothers.
I think when she's talking about brothers, She's meaning the 3 guys that she accused of this horrific, disgusting smut porn gang rape. So brothers in Christ.
And I hope that they can forgive me.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And I want them to know that I love them.
I hope that they can forgive me. Still about Crystal. It's still about Crystal.
And they didn't deserve that. And I
Yeah, they didn't deserve it.
hope they can forgive me.
And it's all about me. I hope they can forgive me.
And that I hope that they can heal and trust God and know that God loves them.
This is so typical, by the way, of females in general, apologizing for something they didn't do. Like a female can do 10 things that are just grievous and odious to you. And then in general, not all females, in general, it's a lot of them, can do 10 things to you. And then when you're like, screw this, not going to have this in my life, they're like, oh, wait a second. And then they begin apologizing for everything but the 10 things they did. Even saying shit like, I'm sorry you took it that way. What?
And
I don't know. I mean, there's definitely something to this. I won't get into it right now. Cockatoo says, loving the Boss Bear sexy haircut and the color blue. Ah, thank you. Boss Bear sexy. Boss Bear sexy in the house. Thank you. I appreciate that. Ivan said, and Ivan is right. Ivan is so often right. A swashbuckling commander. He says, they might forgive her, but God won't. Absolutely. You have to be punished. There's no creator would have it any other way. No creator would have it any other way. That you get to sidestep. You got a little gimmick. You know, I think it's funny. So many of these conservative or these Catholic nationalists, they all think there's this witty way to get around punishment for being a POS, being evil, being etc. They all think there's like a way to get around it. And then they will ridicule Jews who, in some of their religious writings, talk about having conversations with God and talking him out of punishing them individually or as a people, talking God out of it. And they'll ridicule that as though, God, these people really have some serious hubris. They're really arrogant. You do the same fucking thing. In Catholicism, you could rape children your whole life. And as long as you ask for forgiveness on your deathbed, God's just going to bring you in heaven. Well, I got some answers for you. You're going to hell, and there's never getting out of it. You're going to hell, and if there is no afterlife, a proper society will make sure that you experience hell before your end.
that God is loving them through me.
God's loving them through me. Well, thank you, Crystal Meth Mangum, for being the vessel of God's love to direct at these boys.
Letting them know that they're valuable and that they didn't deserve that.
Joining me now is CNN's.
They didn't deserve it. Stumbling asks, good to see you. Great stumbling is in the chat. Do you think this female behavior is a result of anti-whiteism? It is a magnification. I don't know. I'm answering a generalized question here. We're not coming at this with any specificity. Generally speaking, anti-whiteism magnifies the worst traits. So for each female, it'll be a little different, and same for males as well. it'll be a little different. But in all cases, there's going to be a magnification as a consequence of anti-whiteism. There would be, in a society run by us, for us, infused at every level with our biospirit, a much steeper requirement for moral behavior in dealing with each other and communally and with society, between the individual and society at large. And the punishment would be much graver for deviation.
Gene Casares, who reported heavily on this case. Gene, give us a sense of how impactful and controversial.
Oh my God. Ah! Don't ever say impactful. There are few things that I would choke people out. Like in the grocery line, if I hear you say impactful, you'll wake up when I left. You'll say, what happened? That guy just choked your ass right out. What for? I don't know, but impactful was the last thing you said. My God, just for you all know, when people say things like this, it like sticks with me for a day. I'm going to be hating on him for an entire day. I'm going to be making food and I'm going to be eating. And the whole time I'm going to be like, that SOB using impactful.
These accusations and the result were at that time. I remember, you remember this story all too well. I mean, this was literally a firestorm of a story back in 2006. The entire country was watching it. And to hear this admission all these years later, it's just extraordinary.
And 3 young lives were destroyed at that time. You know, it was 2006. It was Durham, North Carolina. I was there. I was covering this. And Crystal Mangum made the accusation that she was raped by David Evans, Cullen Finnerty, and Reed Segelman. And there were charges, very serious sexual assault charges that had terms of imprisonment for the rest of their lives. And in Durham, that's where it started. And everyone took Crystal Mangum's side because she came out with details, very specific, graphic.
No. See, this, of course, I don't expect this woman to get it right. Chavez or whatever her name is. I don't expect her to get it right. She's a deep sea fish in the deep sea of anti-whiteism and the anti-white narrative. So obviously, everyone believed her because she had graphic details. No. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Everyone believed her because they're white, because these young men whose lives she ruined are white. That's why everybody believed her, because the white race was on trial, as always.
Details. And the young men said, we didn't do this. But Duke University did not stand by them either. They were just really silent. But everyone was focused that she was telling the truth. They weren't. Then it went to a national level, and their names became household names.
Now you see, this is a great example. What would a cuck say here? One of these anti-white cuck bitches that we're going to be dealing with. We need to make memes about them. We need to go after them, to ridicule the ever-living shit out of cucks. What would a cuck say right here? Well, this was a Me Too, an abstraction. This was a Me Too incident, another abstraction. Anything to get away from pointing out that this is all about anti-whiteism. This is the white race on trial. Everybody believed the whore stripper with a record, with this insane smut pornography claim. It would have been it still would have been unbelievable. But if she would have said that some like much more basic, much more vapid kind of rape, where they just told me that if I ever told anybody that nobody would ever believe me, and so they forced me to lie there and take it. That would have been at least more believable, even though it's still fake. But no, she had all of these graphic details, which where would she get them from? Because she probably lived them willingly with other people. She probably did have foursomes with 3 other guys.
And they were taken into court on these very serious charges. And they were in college. They were at Duke University. Furthermore, the lacrosse team, their entire season was canceled. The coach was fired. So there were ramifications from it. Now, 1 year later,
there were also ramifications for the family members of these guys. They were being accosted, as I recall. Check it out for yourself. Look back. It was 2006. Family members were being accosted. They were out in public. How dare you, rapist son? Your rapist brother. No apologies to them. No apology to these guys either. What she just said, I didn't hear an apology anywhere.
The attorney general exonerated them of innocence, but there's so much more to the story. I was in the courtroom, and Mike Nifong, the district attorney of Durham, was charged with criminal contempt and then also for disbarment of his bar license. And it came out what the truth was. One of the defense teams had a young attorney, just got out of law school, and he would stay up at night reading the thousands of pages of DNA evidence. And he found something in one of those thousands of pages that confirmed that their DNA was not a part of DNA that they had collected from her. And that DNA evidence is actually one of the major factors that they were exonerated. And that came out during Mike Nifong's trial. He was convicted, by the way, the district attorney who had stood by her and had.
Would you be convicted today in 2024, 2025 we're going into for railroading white people who were innocent? Probably not. Those days are gone. Why is that? We've talked about it many times. Nodes of power. How many people who are anti-white, either anti-white light to anti-white radical, are in nodes of power in America, across the West now? Enormous numbers of them. And we got to see it firsthand during the summer of anti-white terrorism, death, rapine, and destruction of Western civilization. Notice how I didn't call it the summer of love like the cucks do. So back then, 2006, 18, almost, working on 20 years ago, you still had enough nodes of power where the people were anti-white to light to be able to just look away and say, well, I understand that level of criminality in the name of the morality that is anti-whiteism. Now it's gone. And besides, Biden would probably pardon them all. He's pardoned, is it true? Over 8,000, more than double the amount of any other president ever. Hardcore criminals.
Done many interviews about how she was raped so viciously. And then they reclaimed their lives. But right there, I believe that's David Evans right there. He said that he, at the time, because he was in the courtroom during Mike Nifong's trial, he wanted to become an attorney because he wanted to help others who were wrongfully accused. And I don't know if that happened, but that is what he wanted at that time. But they'll always be the 3 Duke lacrosse players, right?
Yeah.
If you say the name
right.
Colin Finnerty, especially if you live in Duke, in Durham, you're going to know who that is.
And Gene, that school's lacrosse program was just smeared. I mean, and I'm sure and the school just suffered major reputational damage after that. Is there anything that could come as in part of the fallout of this? I mean, could there be some sort of lawsuit? I mean, I suppose there might not be much to sue for here. It doesn't sound like Crystal has a whole lot of assets on her.
Well, she's in prison.
Yeah,
she's in prison right now for murder. And so that's true. There were several lawsuits at the time, one against Duke, another against Durham, the city of Durham. But now that she has come out on the record saying it, let's see legally what is available, because it has been almost 20 years. And I'm sure her resources are very, very sparse at this point. But we have tried to contact the three now men involved in this. They were attorneys, and a local paper said that there are not comments at this point of their reaction to all of this.
Wow. All right, Gene, stand by. Really appreciate you.
All right. Enough of that for now. Think about the like second and third and fourth order and fifth order ramifications of this. Did the did the fathers or the mothers at work, did they not get promotions? Did they get demoted? Were they transferred at work? Were they thrown out of the sewing circle? There are so many questions as a consequence of rearing these heretical monsters of anti-whiteism that brutally, smut porn level, raped the ever-living life out of this wonderful little daisy, crystal meth Mangum. Nobody talks about them except us. The ramifications for the white people, nobody talks about them except us.